My personal trainer kept calling me weak for lifting light weights after my injury, so I finally told him I'm one of 12 people who free-soloed El Capitan's Dawn Wall. He was so humiliated, he started stalking me and telling every gym in the state I was mentally unstable from brain damage. My personal trainer kept pushing me to man up and lift heavier weights, insisting I was too weak for serious training. What he didn't know, I'm one of 12 people on Earth who've successfully free-soloed El Capitan's Dawn Wall. I just gotten out of the hospital after a 900-foot fall on Cerro Torre in Patagonia. No ropes, no safety gear, just me, the mountain, and gravity winning that round. The doctors said I'd never walk normally again. I proved them wrong in 4 months. Now I was easing back into fitness after another 2 months of intensive physical therapy from multiple fractures that had healed into a roadmap of scars across my body. The gym assigned me to Brad, your stereotypical 20-something bodybuilder who thought screaming and slamming weights equaled progress. The guy took one look at my rehab plan and scoffed. Dude, this is grandma weight. You'll never see results lifting baby dumbbells. I'm recovering from some injuries, I told him. Everyone's got excuses. Real men push through pain. That's all I needed to know about Brad. Gym bro logic. Ego over intelligence. He even made a snide remark about how I probably hurt myself falling off a stepladder. Right, a stepladder. Second session, Brad tried to triple my weights. I refused and stuck to my prescribed plan. He got more aggressive. This is embarrassing. I've got soccer moms lifting more than you. Third session, he brought in another trainer to motivate me. Marcus, big guy, bench pressed 315 while Brad gave color commentary like he was hosting Sports Center. See that? That's what dedication looks like. No fear. Now your turn. Let's see you lift like you actually want to be here. I'll stick with my current weight. Brad was getting frustrated. I wasn't feeding his need to be the alpha. I wasn't there for his approval. Fourth session, he staged a full-blown intervention. 4 trainers. Public humiliation attempt. This guy's been coming here 6 weeks and still lifting like he's afraid of breaking a nail. Maybe some people just aren't built for real fitness. Brad leaned in, voice dripping with condescension. Have you considered Pilates or water aerobics? Something more. Gentle? I've been patient, professional. But calling someone who's hung by their fingertips 3,000 feet above the valley floor gentle? That's when I was done letting them write my story. You know what? You're absolutely right. Not everyone's built the same. I pulled out my phone and showed them a video. Me, clinging to a granite wall with nothing but chalk on my hands. The Yosemite Valley floor a half-mile straight down. That's El Capitan, the Dawn Wall. 20 pitches of 5. 14 climbing. Silence. Those baby weights, prescribed by specialists who put my skeleton back together after I fell 900 feet off Cerro Torre. Free soloing. No ropes, no protection. Just fingertips and willpower between living and dying. Brad's jaw dropped. The mental barriers you keep mentioning? I've climbed for 36 hours straight. No sleep. Fingers bleeding through tape. Dehydration so bad I was hallucinating. I've held my entire body weight on holds the width of a credit card edge while my muscles screamed for mercy. The other trainers had backed away, processing what they were seeing on the screen. I've free soloed routes where a sneeze means death, where one wrong foot placement sends you into free fall. But sure, tell me more about how bench pressing makes you tough. Marcus finally spoke. Wait, you're that Alex? I nodded. Oh, shh. I watched you climb Moonlight Buttress on the news without ropes. That was insane. Brad was still trying to process. But why are you lifting such light weights? Because when you shatter your L3 and L4 vertebrae, crack 6 ribs, and dislocate both shoulders in a fall that should have culled you, you follow doctor's orders. Real strength isn't about ego. It's about being alive to climb another day. I pulled up another photo. X-rays showing the metal holding my spine together. See those titanium rods? They're the only reason I'm standing here instead of paralyzed. So when my surgeon says light weights only, I listen. Because I've already pushed my body to limits you can't imagine exist. Brad stammered through an apology. I didn't care. I packed my gear and headed for the door. One more thing. I turned back. You want to know what real mental strength is? It's not screaming through one more rep. It's hanging by 3 fingers on a hold the size of a matchbox and staying calm enough to reach the next hold. I then walked out. Good riddance. It should have evaded there, but didn't, because soon he was going to make me regret saying anything in the first place. The next morning, I switched gyms, found a smaller place across town that specialized in rehabilitation training. The owner, a former physical therapist named Victoria, understood recovery timelines and didn't question my light weights. I thought that would be the end of it. 3 days into my new routine, Victoria pulled me aside. She held up a printed email on her phone, frowning. Someone claiming to be my previous trainer had sent a professional courtesy message warning her about my dangerous training habits and refusal to follow expert guidance. The email went on about how I was a liability risk who ignored safety protocols. I recognized Brad's writing style immediately. The same condescending tone, just wrapped in fake concern. Victoria deleted it in front of me, but the damage was starting. This wasn't over. My climbing buddy Theo texted me that afternoon. He'd gotten a strange message on social media from someone asking about my recent accidents and whether I was mentally stable after my fall. The account had no profile picture, created just days ago. Theo had blocked it immediately, but it left us both uneasy. The pattern became clear over the next week. Anonymous complaints to my new gym about my reckless behavior. Messages to members of my climbing community asking about my injuries, implying I was hiding something worse. Someone even called my physical therapist's office claiming to be checking references for an insurance claim. I kept training, focusing on my recovery, but Brad's campaign was escalating. He found my Instagram and started leaving comments on old climbing videos. Shame about the career-ending injuries on a video from 2 years ago. Guess those glory days are over on another. Each comment deleted within hours, but not before others saw them. Marcus found me at a coffee shop near the original gym. He slid into the seat across from me, looking uncomfortable. After some small talk, he admitted Brad had been recruiting people, offering free training sessions to anyone who'd post about seeing me struggle with basic exercises, creating a narrative that I was washed up, broken, lying about my abilities. The worst part? Some people were buying it. A few younger climbers I'd mentored started distancing themselves. One actually asked if I'd exaggerated my climbing achievements. The doubt was spreading like poison through my community. My physical therapist, Dr. Chen, noticed my form suffering during our sessions. The stress was affecting my recovery. She could see the tension in my movements, the way I was unconsciously guarding, protecting myself from more than just physical pain. When she asked what was wrong, I gave her the abbreviated version. She pulled up my file on her tablet, showing me my progress charts. The steady improvement had flatlined over the past 2 weeks. Some metrics were even declining. Brad wasn't just attacking my reputation. He was sabotaging my actual recovery. I started documenting everything. Screenshots of deleted comments, timestamps of anonymous messages, records of every interaction. My laptop became an evidence folder of Brad's escalating harassment, but I needed more than documentation. I needed to understand why he was doing this. Theo did some digging through mutual connections. Turns out Brad had been telling people I'd threatened him, that I'd tried to destroy his career with lies. He'd spun our entire interaction into him being the victim of a delusional client who couldn't accept reality. The story grew with each telling. By the time it reached the local fitness community, I'd apparently screamed at him and threatened violence. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One of the trainers from Brad's intervention, a woman named Vita, reached out through Instagram. She'd been there that day, seen the whole thing. Brad had been spinning the story to everyone, but she knew the truth. More importantly, she knew Brad's pattern. I wasn't his first target. She'd watched him do this before to clients who challenged his authority or made him look bad. Usually, they just left the gym, and that was enough for Brad. But I'd humiliated him in front of his peers, shown him up with actual achievements he couldn't match. His ego couldn't handle it. Vita had screenshots of Brad's group chat where he was coordinating the harassment, messages about teaching that climber freak a lesson, and showing him what happens when you disrespect real athletes. The other trainers were uncomfortable but going along with it, afraid of becoming Brad's next target. She also revealed something worse. Brad had been studying my recovery routine at the old gym, noting which exercises I avoided, which movements caused me to wince. He'd shared this information with his followers, telling them exactly how to spot my weaknesses if they saw me training anywhere. My next climbing session at the local crag became a test. 3 guys I'd never seen before showed up, obviously gym bros, not climbers. They watched watched me warm up on easy routes, making loud comments about how some people should know when to quit, and it's sad watching has-beens pretend they've still got it. When I moved to attempt a moderate route well within my current abilities, one of them actually grabbed my crash pad and moved it. I wonder why Brad needs this much control over someone who's clearly just trying to heal. The way he's recruiting people and spreading lies makes me curious about what's really driving him. This seems way beyond normal gym trainer behavior. Claimed they needed the space for their workout. They'd never touched a climbing hold in their lives, but there they were, trying to intimidate me off the wall. I completed the route anyway, moving carefully but confidently. Each hold was a small victory, each movement proving Brad's narrative wrong. The gym bros left when they realized I wasn't going to break or give them the reaction they wanted, but the pressure was building. My social media filled with anonymous messages questioning my mental health, suggesting the fall had caused brain damage, wondering if I was delusional about my abilities. Someone reported my climbing videos as dangerous content and got several taken down temporarily. The local climbing gym where I'd trained for years suddenly had concerns about my membership. The manager, someone I'd known for a decade, awkwardly explained that they'd received multiple complaints about me making other climbers uncomfortable. When pressed, he admitted the complaints were vague but persistent. My world was shrinking. Gyms questioning my presence, climbing partners receiving warnings about training with me, online harassment increasing daily. Brad had turned a moment of wounded pride into a campaign to destroy everything I'd built. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd survived Cerro Torre, pushed through months of rehabilitation, overcome odds that should have culled me. But here I was, being worn down by a vindictive personal trainer with too much time and too little character. Dr. Chen adjusted my recovery plan, adding stress management techniques. She could see how the harassment was manifesting physically. My inflammation markers were up, sleep quality down, muscle tension increasing. Brad wasn't just attacking my reputation anymore. He was actively harming my recovery. Victoria at the rehab gym stood by me, but I could see the strain. She was getting daily emails now, fake reviews appearing online about her gym harboring dangerous clients. One particularly nasty review claimed I'd dropped weights on another member, complete with fabricated details that sounded just plausible enough to concern potential clients. I considered confronting Brad directly, but Vida warned against it. That's what he wanted. Another confrontation he could spin into evidence of my instability. He was building a case in the court of public opinion, and any reaction from me would be twisted to support his narrative. Instead, I focused on what I could control: my training, my recovery, my actual climbing community, who knew me before any of this started. I reached out to older mentors, people who'd known me since I first touched rock. Their support reminded me who I really was beneath Brad's manufactured drama. But even that came with complications. Some suggested I should just let it go, move to another city, start fresh. Others wanted me to fight back publicly, post my own story, defend myself online. The climbing community was splitting between those who believed Brad's narrative and those who knew better. My phone buzzed with another notification. This time, someone had created a fake account using my name, posting comments on fitness forums about how traditional weight training was superior to climbing. The posts were designed to make me look elitist and delusional, picking fights with gym communities I'd never even interacted with. The sophistication of Brad's campaign was escalating. This wasn't just angry harassment anymore. It was calculated, strategic, designed to isolate me from every possible support system. He'd studied how to destroy someone's reputation without ever crossing into legally actionable territory. I sat in my apartment that night, laptop open to the folder of evidence I'd compiled. Screenshots, dates, times, patterns of behavior. It painted a clear picture of harassment, but what could I really do with it? Brad had been careful. Nothing directly traceable, nothing explicitly threatening. Just a steady erosion of everything I'd built. The climbing wall in my living room, the one I'd installed during recovery to practice easy movements, stood as a reminder of what really mattered. Each hold represented progress, each route a step back toward who I was before the fall. But now, even that felt tainted by Brad's campaign. My phone lit up with a text from Marcus. He wanted to meet again, said he had information I needed to hear. The way he phrased it made me uneasy. Was he still Brad's ally, feeding him information? Or had he finally seen enough to switch sides? I agreed to meet him the next morning, choosing a public place with multiple exits. The paranoia Brad had instilled was affecting my judgment, making me question everyone's motives. This wasn't how I wanted to live, constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering who was reporting back to Brad. That night, I pulled up videos of my old climbs, El Capitan, Moonlight Buttress, routes that had defined my life before the fall. The person in those videos seemed like a stranger now, confident, focused, unaware that a single interaction with an insecure personal trainer could unravel so much. But as I watched myself navigate impossible holds thousands of feet above the ground, I remembered something important. The mental game of climbing wasn't just about managing fear on the wall. It was about persistence, problem solving, finding a way through when the obvious path was blocked. Brad thought he was breaking me down, but he was actually giving me a different kind of training. Every day I continued, despite his harassment, was a small victory. Every workout I completed while anonymous messages flooded my phone was proof of the mental strength he claimed I lacked. The real test wasn't whether I could bench press impressive numbers or satisfy some arbitrary standard of masculinity. It was whether I could maintain focus on my recovery while someone actively tried to sabotage it. Whether I could trust my own experience over the narrative being crafted around me. Tomorrow, I would meet Marcus and hear whatever information he had. I would continue my prescribed exercises despite the watching eyes and whispered comments. I would document every incident and trust that truth had a way of surfacing eventually. Brad had turned what should have been a simple gym interaction into a war of attrition. He was betting I'd break before he got bored, that the pressure would make me retreat entirely from the fitness world we apparently had to share. He'd miscalculated. I'd held on to holds the width of dimes while my forearms screamed for mercy. I'd pushed through dehydration hallucinations to complete routes that defined impossible. I'd survived a fall that should have culled me and spent months relearning to walk. A vindictive personal trainer with a wounded ego wasn't going to be what finally stopped me. But first, I needed to understand the full scope of what I was facing. Marcus's information would hopefully provide that clarity. Marcus arrived at the coffee shop 10 minutes late, constantly checking over his shoulder. He slid into the booth across from me, hands wrapped around his coffee cup like he needed the warmth for courage. His eyes darted between the door and my face as he explained why he'd reached out. Brad's campaign had expanded beyond social media harassment. Marcus revealed that Brad had been systematically contacting every gym within a 50-mile radius, sharing his fabricated version of events. He'd created a detailed dossier about my supposed instability, complete with edited screenshots and twisted timelines. The document painted me as someone who'd suffered permanent brain damage from my fall, someone delusional about their abilities and prone to violent outbursts. What made it worse was Brad's credibility in the local fitness community. He'd been training for 8 years, had connections everywhere. His word carried weight with gym owners who didn't know me personally. Marcus showed me text messages from other trainers discussing whether they should ban me preemptively to avoid potential liability issues. The meeting lasted an hour. Marcus apologized repeatedly for his role in the initial confrontation, explaining how Brad had manipulated the situation. He'd made it seem like I was the aggressor, that the intervention was necessary for everyone's safety. Now Marcus saw the truth, but the damage was spreading faster than either of us had anticipated. After Marcus left, I sat in my car processing the information. My phone buzzed with a message from Victoria. 3 members had just canceled their memberships at her rehab gym, citing concerns about training alongside someone with my documented issues. The fake reviews had multiplied overnight, each one more elaborate than the last. I drove to my afternoon physical therapy appointment with Dr. Chen, my mind racing through possible responses. She immediately noticed my elevated stress levels during our initial assessment. My muscle tension had increased dramatically, undoing weeks of progress. She adjusted my exercises accordingly, but I could see the concern in her professional demeanor. During the session, her receptionist knocked on the door. Someone had called claiming to be from my insurance company, asking detailed questions about my mental state and whether I was complying with treatment. The receptionist had recognized it as suspicious and refused to provide information, but the calls were becoming more frequent. Dr. Chen documented everything in my file, noting the external stressors affecting my recovery. She recommended I consider filing a formal complaint, but we both knew that would only fuel Brad's narrative about my supposed instability. The trap was perfectly constructed. Any defensive action would be twisted into evidence against me. That evening, I attempted my usual climbing workout at home. My grip strength had noticeably decreased, my movements less fluid than the week before. The physical manifestation of stress was undeniable. Marcus showing up with actual proof makes me wonder how Brad got so good at destroying people without leaving his fingerprints on anything. Each hold felt less secure. Each movement required more conscious effort. Brad's psychological warfare was achieving what my 900-foot fall hadn't. It was making me doubt my abilities. Theo showed up unannounced, bringing dinner and a laptop full of research. He'd been tracking the fake accounts, mapping their creation dates, and posting patterns. The network was extensive but sloppy. All the accounts had been created within a 2-week window. All followed similar patterns. All pushed the same narrative with slight variations. We spent hours documenting the harassment network, creating our own counter dossier. Theo had found other climbers who'd received the anonymous messages, gym owners who'd gotten the warning emails. The scope was staggering. Brad had turned his wounded ego into a full-time vendetta. The next morning brought a new development. A popular climbing blogger had received an anonymous tip about my mental breakdown at Brad's gym. The blogger, someone I'd climbed with years ago, reached out to verify the story. She forwarded me the email. It was professionally written, included fabricated witness statements, even had a timeline that mixed real events with complete fiction. I spent an hour on the phone with her, explaining the actual situation. She believed me, but the fact that Brad's lies had reached climbing media was alarming. If even one outlet ran with his version, it would become the accepted truth. The climbing community was small. Reputation was everything. Victoria called during lunch. Another trainer at her gym, someone she trusted, had been secretly recording my workouts. The videos, taken out of context, showed me grimacing during exercises, moving slowly, occasionally pausing to manage pain. Normal recovery behavior, but edited to support Brad's narrative about my deteriorating condition. The betrayal stung more than the harassment. This trainer, James, had seemed supportive. He'd asked about my climbing experiences, shown interest in my recovery journey. All the while, he'd been feeding information to Brad, helping build the case against me. I confronted James that afternoon. He was preparing for a client when I walked up to his station. His face went pale when he saw me. Without saying a word, I held up my phone, showing screenshots of his messages to Brad, evidence Vida had provided. He stammered through excuses about needing the extra training sessions Brad offered, about not meaning for it to go this far. His client watched uncomfortably as James's story unraveled. He'd been promised a position at Brad's gym, better pay, more prestigious clients. All he had to do was document my struggles and report back. He hadn't realized it would escalate beyond simple observation. Victoria overheard the confrontation and immediately terminated James's contract. Word spread through the gym quickly. Members who'd been suspicious of the negative reviews suddenly understood what was happening. The tide began to shift, but the damage to my routine was done. I'd lost another safe training space. That night, I met with a small group of longtime climbing friends. They'd been watching the situation unfold, unsure how to help. Now, they were angry. Brad had crossed from personal vendetta into attacking our entire community. These were people who'd climbed with me for years, who knew my character beyond any fabricated narrative. We developed a plan, not for retaliation, but for truth. Each of them would reach out to their networks, sharing their actual experiences training and climbing with me. They'd post videos of our past climbs, testimonials about my safety practices, evidence that contradicted Brad's fiction. It wasn't about attacking him. It was about drowning out his lies with reality. The response was immediate. My Instagram flooded with support from climbers around the world. People shared stories of their own recovery journeys, their own encounters with toxic gym culture. The climbing community that Brad had tried to turn against me instead rallied in support, but Brad wasn't finished. The next morning, I arrived at a local crag to find new signs posted. Warning, unstable climber, approach at your own risk, with my photo attached. Park rangers were already removing them, but several climbers had seen them first. The psychological impact was intentional, making me question whether I was welcome in my own community. I climbed anyway. Each route was a declaration that I wouldn't be driven away. Other climbers joined me, making a point of asking for beta, sharing gear, normalizing my presence, but I could feel the weight of Brad's campaign in every movement, every interaction tinged with defiance rather than joy. Dr. Chen called an emergency session. My stress hormones were dangerously elevated, cortisol levels indicating chronic activation of fight or flight responses. She was genuinely concerned about the impact on my physical recovery. The metal in my spine didn't care about psychological warfare. It needed a calm system to heal properly. She wrote a detailed medical report documenting how external harassment was impeding my recovery. It was clinical, objective, and damning. Brad's actions weren't just hurting my reputation, they were causing measurable medical harm. She offered to send it to relevant parties if needed. Meanwhile, Vida had been gathering more evidence. She'd convinced 2 other trainers to come forward with their experiences of Brad's bullying. His pattern went back years. Clients who didn't feed his ego faced systematic harassment until they left. Most just disappeared quietly. I was the first to have a platform that threatened his narrative. She also revealed that Brad's own position at the gym was precarious. His client retention rates were abysmal, complaints frequent but usually dismissed. The gym owner, focused on membership numbers, had overlooked the toxic culture Brad created. But now other trainers were speaking up, emboldened by the spotlight on Brad's behavior. The pressure was building on both sides. Brad's harassment intensified. Fake emergency calls to my apartment, pizza deliveries I hadn't ordered, subscriptions to magazines about head trauma recovery. Petty but persistent, designed to wear me down through sheer annoyance. I responded by doubling down on my training. Every successful climb was documented, every recovery milestone shared with my growing support network. The contrast between Brad's fiction and my reality became increasingly stark. Videos of me completing difficult boulder problems contradicted claims about my diminished capacity. Then came the escalation I'd been dreading. Brad showed up at Victoria's gym during my regular training time. He stood outside, not technically trespassing, but clearly there to intimidate. He held his phone up, recording my workout through the windows. Other members noticed, tension filling the space. Victoria handled it professionally, calling building security to address the loitering. But Brad's message was clear. He knew my schedule, my safe spaces, my routines. The psychological boundary between harassment and stalking was blurring. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every noise seemed threatening, every shadow suspicious. The hypervigilance that had saved my life on countless climbs was now exhausting me in my own apartment. Brad had succeeded in making me feel unsafe in spaces that should have been sanctuaries. Theo stayed over, setting up on my couch like a guardian. We talked through the night about next steps, about how to end this without escalating further. The evidence folder had grown massive, the pattern of harassment undeniable. But what would actually make Brad stop? The answer came from an unexpected source. Marcus texted the next morning with urgent news. Brad's gym had launched an internal investigation. Too many complaints had accumulated. Too many trainers had spoken up. His targeting of me had exposed a pattern of behavior the gym could no longer ignore. But Brad, sensing the walls closing in, became more desperate. The anonymous messages increased, now including threats about revealing my real medical records and promises to ensure I'd never climb professionally again. The tone had shifted from harassment to something darker. I screenshot everything, building a comprehensive timeline. Each escalation was documented, each threat preserved. The folder became a testament to how far someone would go to protect their fragile ego. It was exhausting maintaining such vigilance, but necessary. My climbing performance surprisingly improved during this period. The mental discipline required to free solo translated well to compartmentalizing Brad's harassment. On the rock, none of his lies mattered. Gravity didn't care about social media rumors. The stone remained honest in a way humans weren't. Videos of my climbs spread through the community faster than Brad's lies. Climbers who'd initially distanced themselves themselves reached out with apologies. They'd been confused by the conflicting narratives, unsure what to believe. Seeing me climb with the same precision and control as before cleared any doubts. Dr. Chen noted the interesting paradox during our next session. While the stress was affecting my recovery in measurable ways, my mental resilience was strengthening. Each day I continued despite Brad's campaign was building a different kind of endurance. She called it post-traumatic growth, becoming stronger at the broken places. The investigation at Brad's gym intensified. Current and former clients were interviewed, patterns documented. What emerged was worse than simple harassment. Brad had a history of targeting clients who threatened his self-image, particularly those with achievements beyond the weight room. Athletes, dancers, martial artists, anyone whose strength didn't match his narrow definition faced his wrath. Victoria's gym became a refuge for several of Brad's former victims. They shared their stories, finding solidarity and survival. There's something odd about Brad recording through gym windows that crosses into territory that makes me wonder what he thinks he's actually accomplishing here, beyond making himself look unstable. One woman, a former Olympic gymnast, described how Brad had sabotaged her comeback after injury. Another, a marathon runner, explained how he'd convinced her she was too weak for real training. The patterns were consistent and disturbing. We formed an informal support group, meeting weekly to process our experiences. It wasn't about revenge, it was about healing and preventing future victims. Each story added weight to the investigation, painted a clearer picture of Brad's systematic abuse of his position. The climbing community's response evolved from support to action. Gym owners who'd received Brad's warnings about me started comparing notes. They realized they'd all gotten similar emails about different climbers over the years. Brad's credibility crumbled as his pattern became obvious. Then Vida made a crucial discovery. Brad's fitness certifications had expired 2 years ago. He'd been training clients without valid credentials, a violation that could end his career regardless of the harassment. She'd found the information while researching his background, a detail his gym had apparently overlooked. The revelation shifted everything. This wasn't just about toxic behavior anymore. It was about professional fraud. Every client he'd trained while uncertified had grounds for complaint. The gym faced potential liability for employing him without verifying his credentials. I felt the momentum shifting but remained cautious. Cornered animals were dangerous, and Brad's entire identity was built on his trainer persona. Losing that would make him more unpredictable, not less. My instincts proved correct. The next day, Brad appeared at the crag where I was climbing. Not the busy areas where others might intervene, but a remote section where I often trained alone. He stood at the base of my route, arms crossed, watching me climb. I completed the route despite the distraction, down climbing carefully rather than dropping to the crash pad near where he stood. Other climbers noticed the tension, gradually moving closer without making it obvious. The climbing community protected its own. Brad's demeanor had changed. The cocky arrogance was replaced by something more desperate. He started talking about how I'd ruined his life, how his reputation was destroyed because I couldn't take a joke. The narrative in his head bore no resemblance to reality. I packed my gear methodically, not engaging with his distorted version of events. Other climbers formed a subtle barrier between us, their presence preventing any escalation. Brad eventually left, but the encounter left everyone shaken. His behavior was becoming increasingly erratic. That evening, Victoria received notice that Brad's gym had terminated his employment. The combination of expired certifications, multiple harassment complaints, and the ongoing investigation made his position untenable. But rather than ending the situation, his termination seemed to accelerate his campaign against me. The anonymous messages became more frequent and aggressive. Fake accounts multiplied faster than platforms could remove them. Someone was calling gyms claiming I'd been banned from their facilities for violent behavior. The lies were becoming more elaborate and harder to disprove. I realized Brad had nothing left to lose. His career was over, his reputation destroyed, his identity shattered. In his mind, I was responsible for all of it. The rational boundaries that had limited his harassment were gone. Working with Theo and Vida, we compiled everything into a comprehensive report. The harassment, the stalking, the escalating behavior, all documented with timestamps and evidence. It painted a clear picture of someone spiraling beyond simple revenge into dangerous obsession. The local climbing coalition got involved, issuing warnings about Brad to all affiliated gyms and crags. His photo was distributed with instructions to monitor for concerning behavior. The community that he tried to turn against me instead united to ensure everyone's safety. My recovery continued despite everything. Each physical therapy session showed improvement. Each climbing workout pushed slightly harder than the last. The titanium in my spine didn't care about human drama. It fused and strengthened according to biological timelines, not social ones. Dr. Chen marveled at my progress given the circumstances. Most patients dealing with such stress showed significant setbacks, but the mental fortitude developed through years of free soloing served me well. I'd learned to function despite fear, to perform while managing risk. Brad was just another hazard to navigate. The final straw came when Brad contacted my sponsors. Using a professional-sounding email account, he sent detailed messages about my deteriorating mental state and dangerous behavior. He included edited videos from James's secret recordings, cropped to remove context and support his narrative. Fortunately, my sponsors knew me well. They'd followed my career for years, understood the risks I took and how I managed them. They forwarded the emails to me immediately, concerned about the harassment rather than the accusations. Their lawyers got involved, sending cease and desist letters to every email address Brad had used. The legal pressure combined with his employment termination finally seemed to penetrate Brad's delusion. The messages slowed, then stopped. The fake accounts went dormant. For the first time in months, a day passed without some form of harassment, but I remained vigilant. Patterns of escalation rarely ended abruptly without resolution. Brad was out there, unemployed and angry, his worldview shattered by his own actions. The climbing community maintained its watchfulness, understanding that wounded pride could resurface at any moment. My training intensified as the harassment decreased. Without the constant stress of Brad's campaign, my recovery accelerated. The movements that had felt forced became fluid again. The strength that had wavered returned with interest. My body remembered what my mind had never forgotten: how to move on stone, how to trust in my abilities. Videos of my progress spread through the climbing world, not as defiance against Brad anymore, but as celebration of what was possible. Other injured climbers reached out, inspired by the recovery journey. The narrative shifted from surviving harassment to thriving despite it. Victoria's gym grew as word spread about how she'd handled the situation. Her zero-tolerance policy for harassment and manipulation attracted clients tired of toxic gym culture. James's betrayal had ultimately strengthened her community by clarifying its values. The support group continued meeting, evolving from crisis management to prevention advocacy. We created resources for recognizing and addressing trainer harassment, guidelines for gym owners, and support networks for victims. Brad's campaign had inadvertently sparked positive change in the local fitness community. Vida emerged as a leader in this movement. Her courage in exposing Brad's behavior inspired other trainers to speak up about toxic colleagues. The culture of silence that had enabled Brad for years began to crumble. Gyms started taking complaints seriously, implementing better oversight and accountability. My sponsorship deals actually strengthened through the ordeal. The climbing brands appreciated how I'd handled the situation without descending to Brad's level. They saw the community support as evidence of my character. What Brad intended as career destruction became professional validation. Dr. Chen documented my complete recovery arc, noting how external stress had initially impeded, then ultimately strengthened my mental resilience. She used my case, anonymously, in presentations about the mind-body connection in rehabilitation. The harassment had become data, supporting the importance of addressing psychological factors in physical recovery. 6 months after that confrontation in Brad's gym, I achieved a milestone. I completed my first serious multi-pitch climb since the accident. Nothing extreme by my previous standards, but proof that my body and mind were healing together. The photos showed someone who'd survived more than a physical fall. The climbing community celebrated with me, understanding the significance beyond the grade. This wasn't just about returning to form, it was about refusing to let let someone else's toxicity define my limits. Every hold was a choice to continue despite opposition. Brad had disappeared from the fitness scene entirely. Rumors placed him in different cities, trying to restart under different names. His pattern would likely continue elsewhere, but the network of communication among gym owners made it harder for him to operate without scrutiny. His own actions had created the accountability he'd tried to avoid. I returned to Brad's original gym one day, not as a member, but to retrieve some gear I'd left in my rushed exit. The atmosphere had changed completely. New management, new trainers, new culture. Several members recognized me, offering apologies for not speaking up sooner. They'd watched Brad's behavior for years, but hadn't known how to address it. The new head trainer asked if I'd consider teaching a climbing conditioning class. The irony wasn't lost on either of us, returning to the place where I'd been deemed too weak, now as an instructor. I declined politely, but appreciated the gesture. Some circles didn't need closing. My focus returned to what mattered. The stone, the movement, the mental game that made impossible climbs possible. Brad's harassment had been a detour, not a destination. The skills that let me hang from tiny holds thousands of feet up had served me well on the ground. Persistence, problem solving, and calm under pressure worked in any arena. The evidence folder remained on my laptop, a digital monument to how far someone would go to protect their ego, but it gathered dust now, irrelevant to my forward progress. How did Brad manage to keep training people for 2 whole years without anyone checking his papers? The way different gyms all got those same warning emails about different climbers makes me wonder if he kept a spreadsheet or something to track his lies. Brad had wanted to define me by my weaknesses. Instead, he'd reminded me of my strengths. Training continued with renewed purpose. Each session built on the last, progressing toward goals Brad couldn't imagine. The Dawn Wall had required 2 years of preparation. Recovery from Cerro Torre was just another long-term project. Harassment from an insecure trainer barely registered on the scale of challenges I'd chosen to face. The community that had rallied around me became stronger for the experience. Climbers looked out for each other more consciously. Gyms implemented better policies, and trainers held each other accountable. Brad's legacy was the opposite of what he'd intended. Instead of destroying one climber, he'd strengthened an entire community. My story spread beyond climbing circles, resonating with anyone who'd faced workplace harassment or professional bullying. The specifics varied, but the patterns remained consistent. Fragile egos lashing out at perceived threats, systems enabling toxic behavior through inaction, communities finding strength and solidarity. But I resisted becoming a symbol or spokesperson. My goal had always been simple: recover from my injuries and return to climbing. Brad had complicated that journey but hadn't changed the destination. The mountains waited with patient indifference to human drama. I met with the Climbing Coalition board the following week. They'd compiled reports from gyms across the region, documenting Brad's systematic harassment campaign. The evidence was overwhelming, but they needed my testimony to complete their safety protocols. I spent 3 hours detailing every incident, watching their expressions shift from concern to outrage as the pattern became undeniable. The coalition's response was swift. They issued a formal safety alert to all affiliated facilities, complete with Brad's photo and detailed description of his tactics. Gym owners who dismissed individual complaints suddenly understood they'd been targeted as part of a coordinated campaign. The network that Brad had exploited to spread his lies now worked against him. Victoria's gym became the unofficial headquarters for our growing support network. Former clients of Brad's continued reaching out, sharing stories that stretched back years. A rock climber from Colorado emailed about Brad sabotaging her training after she'd corrected his technique. A CrossFit athlete described how Brad had spread rumors about steroid use when the athlete outperformed him. The pattern was exhausting in its consistency. Brad targeted anyone whose achievements threatened his self-image, using the same playbook each time: create doubt about their abilities, question their mental state, isolate them from support systems. Most victims had simply left, unwilling to fight the tide of manufactured controversy. Dr. Chen incorporated our group's experiences into a research proposal about harassment's impact on physical recovery. She documented measurable differences in healing rates between patients facing external stressors and those in supportive environments. My case became a cornerstone example, showing how psychological warfare could manifest as physical setbacks. During a particularly intense physical therapy session, I finally broke through a plateau that had frustrated me for weeks. The movement that had been impossible just days before suddenly flowed naturally. Dr. Chen noted that the breakthrough coincided with Brad's harassment stopping. My body had been holding trauma it couldn't process while under constant attack. Vita organized a meeting with Brad's former gym management. She convinced them to review their hiring and oversight practices, using Brad's case as a cautionary tale. The gym owner, finally understanding the liability he'd ignored for years, implemented mandatory background checks and certification verification for all trainers. The changes rippled through the local fitness community. Other gyms began reviewing their own policies, realizing they'd been operating on trust rather than verification. Brad's expired certifications had exposed a widespread problem. Many facilities had never actually verified their trainers' credentials. I returned to serious climbing training with renewed focus, each session built on the last, my body remembering its capabilities as the stress dissipated. The routes that had seemed impossible during Brad's campaign now felt achievable. Not easy. My injuries had left permanent reminders, but possible. The climbing community's response evolved into something unexpected. What started as defensive support became proactive change. Gyms implemented anti-harassment policies with real teeth. Climbers created buddy systems for those dealing with toxic situations. The culture shifted from silent endurance to active intervention. My sponsor surprised me with an invitation to speak at their annual athlete summit. Not about Brad or the harassment, but about mental resilience during recovery. They'd watch me navigate both physical and psychological challenges, seeing lessons that could help other athletes facing setbacks. I declined the speaking opportunity, but agreed to write something for their internal newsletter. The piece focused on recognizing manipulation tactics and maintaining focus despite external pressure. No names, no specific incidents, just practical advice drawn from hard experience. Theo discovered Brad had relocated to Arizona, attempting to restart his training career. The Climbing Coalition's alert system activated immediately. Within days, gyms in Phoenix and Tucson had received warnings about his history. His reputation preceded him, making it impossible to establish himself without scrutiny. The informal support group at Victoria's gym evolved into something more structured. We created a resource guide for people facing trainer harassment, including warning signs, documentation strategies, and support resources. Victoria made it available at her front desk, normalizing the conversation around toxic gym behavior. Marcus reached out periodically with updates from Brad's old gym. The culture had transformed completely under new management. Trainers who'd enabled Brad's behavior either adapted or left. Members felt safer speaking up about concerns. The toxic environment Brad had cultivated for years dissolved in months. My recovery accelerated beyond Dr. Chen's most optimistic projections. The combination of consistent training, reduced stress, and community support created ideal healing conditions. The titanium in my spine had fully integrated, the surrounding muscles strengthening to compensate for permanent limitations. 6 months after Brad's termination, I attempted my first truly challenging climb since Cerro Torre. Not a free solo, those days were behind me, but a complex route that demanded everything I'd rebuilt. The familiar dance between fear and focus returned, my body responding to demands I thought it might never meet again. The successful climb marked more than physical recovery. It proved that Brad's attempts to define my limitations had failed completely. Every hold gained was a rejection of his narrative. Every move a demonstration that strength comes in forms he'd never understand. Victoria's gym hosted a celebration for several of us who'd reached recovery milestones, former victims of Brad's harassment mixed with other clients overcoming their own challenges. The atmosphere was one of shared triumph, each person's success amplifying others' achievements. During the celebration, someone mentioned seeing Brad's profile on a fitness app advertising online training services. His bio claimed extensive experience, but carefully avoided avoided mentioning any specific gyms or certifications. The old anger flickered briefly before fading. He was someone else's problem now, his own choices creating the consequences he faced. The Climbing Coalition published their annual safety report, including a section on harassment prevention. They turned Brad's campaign into a case study, showing how predatory behavior could escalate and how communities could respond. Gym owners across the country requested copies, recognizing similar patterns in their own facilities. My training routine stabilized into something sustainable, not the intense preparation for free soloing that had defined my earlier career, but consistent progress toward new goals. The mountain still called, just with different challenges than before. Rope climbing offered its own rewards, especially with partners who'd stood by me through everything. Dr. Chen discharged me from formal physical therapy with a comprehensive assessment. My recovery had exceeded medical expectations, she noted, crediting both physical resilience and psychological support. The harassment had temporarily derailed progress, but ultimately demonstrated the interconnection between mental and physical healing. I kept the evidence folder on my laptop, occasionally updating it when news of Brad surfaced, not from obsession, but as a reminder of what I'd overcome. The hundreds of screenshots and documents told a story of persistence that had nothing to do with climbing walls and everything to do with refusing to let someone else write my narrative. The local climbing scene thrived in the absence of Brad's toxic influence. New climbers felt welcome to struggle without judgment. Experienced athletes shared knowledge without ego. The community had learned to recognize and reject the behavior patterns Brad represented. One afternoon at the crag, a young climber approached hesitantly. She'd heard about my recovery journey and wanted advice about returning to climbing after a serious injury. We spent an hour discussing the mental challenges beyond physical healing, the importance of trusting your own timeline despite external pressure. As she walked away with renewed determination, I realized Brad had inadvertently created something positive. His harassment had forced conversations about toxic behavior that might have remained unspoken. His victims had found each other and built something stronger than what he'd tried to destroy. The final documentation in my evidence folder came from Vita. Brad had been denied employment at 3 more gyms, each having received warnings about his history. His online training business had failed to launch after potential clients researched his background. He'd created his own prison of reputation, locked in by his own actions. I returned to El Capitan on the anniversary of my fall from Cerro Torre. Not to climb, that wasn't the point, but to remember what real challenge looked like. Standing at the base of Dawn Wall, I felt the familiar pull of vertical granite, the call to push beyond comfortable limits. But I also felt something new, an understanding that strength isn't just about what you can hold on to, but what you can let go. Brad had tried to make me carry his insecurity, his narrow definition of worth. I'd learned to drop that weight, to climb unburdened by someone else's limitations. The sun set over Yosemite Valley as I packed up my gear. Tomorrow would bring new training, new challenges, new opportunities to grow. The mountains would wait with patient indifference, caring nothing for human drama, offering their lessons to anyone willing to learn. My phone buzzed with a message from Victoria. Another former client of Brad's had reached out, seeking support and guidance. The cycle continued, but now with infrastructure to help. What Brad had started as a campaign of destruction had transformed into a network of support. I drove home through familiar roads, each turn a reminder of how far I'd traveled beyond miles. The titanium in my spine would always mark where I'd broken, but it also showed where I'd healed stronger. Brad had tried to break something deeper than bone. He'd failed because he never understood what real strength looked like. Back at my apartment, I closed the evidence folder for the last time. The story it contained was finished, its lessons learned and shared. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but they'd be ones I chose to face. The climbing wall in my living room caught the last light of day, each hold a possibility, each route a choice. My recovery was complete, not perfect. Perfection was never the goal, but whole in ways that mattered. I'd survived a 900-foot fall and rebuilt my body. I'd survived Brad's campaign and rebuilt my community. Both had taught me that the hardest climbs aren't always vertical. The next morning brought clear skies and perfect conditions. I headed to the gym, Victoria's gym, where familiar faces greeted me with genuine warmth. My training began with the same light weights that Brad had mocked, each rep a conscious choice to honor my body's journey. Around me, others pursued their own goals without judgment or comparison. The toxic culture Brad had represented felt like ancient history, replaced by something healthier and more sustainable. We'd all learned to recognize and reject those who confuse dominance with strength. My workout complete, I stopped by Victoria's office. She showed me the latest statistics. Membership had increased 40% since implementing the new policies. More importantly, member retention was at an all-time high. People felt safe to be vulnerable, to struggle, to grow at their own pace. The future stretched ahead with familiar uncertainty, new climbs to attempt, new challenges to face, new lessons to learn. But now I faced them with a community that understood support over competition, growth over ego. Brad's legacy was the opposite of what he'd intended. He'd made us all stronger by showing us what weakness really looked like. If you guys do not mind the commentary, please like the video because it helps out a lot more than you think.